Welcome back to the Captain Mike Show. And this is another exciting episode where we're going to hopefully finish up chapter 8 of Daniel, maybe even get into chapter 9 a little bit. For those of you who were in the previous video, I left off describing the ram being the Medo-Persian Empire and Alexander the Great's empire represented by a goat with a notable horn on it, and that ultimately Alexander defeated the Medo-Persian Empire. And then out of that came four notable ones. And the reason it says out of the he-goat came the four notable ones was that because when Alexander died prematurely in his early 30s, the four generals divided up basically what the known world was at that time. And there's a lot of that described in chapter 11 of Daniel that we'll get into later, which, as I've alluded to before, is one of the more difficult but exciting chapters of the Bible to understand and interpret properly. But anyhow, we're going to just now getting ready to jump into verse 9 of chapter 8 of the book of Daniel. And out of one of them came forth a little horn. Well, let me back up into verse 8. It might be a little clearer. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the pleasant land, which would be Israel. Okay? And it waxed great, even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Yea, he even magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. And a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Okay, I'm going to stop right there because there's a lot going on right there. And that's one thing about, I haven't really probably mentioned too much in this study, is that in a few verses of the Bible, there can be dramatic time shifts going. There can be hundreds of years in just the matter of a couple of verses in the Bible. And we're seeing some amazing, what I call looking down the corridor of time travel kind of stuff here in these verses I just read from 9 through 12, so to speak. So we're going to slow down a little bit, and we're going to go back through this. Okay, so last time we checked in, we were when the Greek kingdom took over, which is around 330 BC or so, or thereabouts, that Alexander died. His four generals took over, and they started dividing the known earth, civilized earth at that time, into regions. And what's interesting, it kind of stops right there, and then it moves rapidly forward to end times. That's right, from like 350 BC all the way even beyond where we're at. And that's why it's really important, I've said this before and I'll say it again, I'll probably say it quite a few more times, is you have to really learn to flow with these Old Testament prophets. Because Isaiah is notorious for like talking to some guy in front of him, and then off in the spirit realm he goes, and before you know it, he's talking about something 2,000 years in the future. And it doesn't mean it's not accurate. It just means you got to pay attention how those Old Testament prophets flowed, how the Holy Spirit fell upon them. And it can be a little confusing if you don't get that. And Jeremiah did that. Ezekiel did that. Isaiah did that. Obviously, Daniel did it, and I'm not sure if any of the lesser prophets, they might have done it too. Oh, I'm sure Zechariah did it, because Zechariah was pretty spiritual and pretty out there. So, in fact, I know he did. He talked about some of the millennial reign, and he hinted to some of the two witnesses in Revelation 11 too, in Zechariah. I believe it's 3 or 4, chapter 3 or 4. So, but I digress. Moving back to where we're at. So here we go. In verse 9, and out of one of them came forth, we're in chapter 8 of Daniel, verse 9, and out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great, towards the south, towards the east, and towards the pleasant land. And it waxed great, even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Basically what you're seeing here is a picture of Satan behind the scenes controlling this world leader. And it talks about the rebellion in heaven that happened with a third of the angels that were cast out of heaven to serve Lucifer or Satan, and 2/3 of God's angels stayed put. And so it's speaking of this great battle. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, which would be the Christ figure, or Christ, or God. And by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. So the daily sacrifice was taken away, which we talked about earlier, which is when the abomination sets up desolation, which we're getting to more later on. As we get into Daniel is set up, it's kind of flipping into that future zone there. Now, I need to stop and make a little footnote here. There is I was going to say creature, which probably is a good way to describe him. There is a king that came up out of the Alexander kingdoms. That he was a king of the north, and his name was Antioch Epiphanes, and he was a very bad Antichrist type, kind of like a Hitler was Hitler in modern days, an Antichrist type. And he persecuted the Jews, put a pig on the altar of God in Jerusalem, and ultimately led to the Maccabean revolt, to shake that satanic control off during that period, about 130, 150 BC time period. And so there is a little bit of reflection in the mirror of the water of Bible prophecy. The fluidity of Bible prophecy can be tricky. It doesn't mean it's not true. It just means it does take a little bit of brain power to discern when you're in a present prophecy, when you're in a prophecy that is 100 years in the future, when you're a prophecy that's like 2,000 years in the future. Those can all be mixed up within a few verses. And this is actually a pretty good example of that. And I'm not going to try to spend too much time describing this, because we don't know enough to this is one of this 20% area of Bible prophecy that can be debated. So I'm moving on. Okay, he and the host of and verse 12. Well, verse 11 describes his character. We're really interested in character. I really enjoy the character of these characters. Makes sense. Okay. Yea, he magnified himself, even the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. And a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. So this guy's going to be able to really suppress Christianity, and he's going to be able to cast it to the ground, and he's really kind of going to drive the believers underground. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto the certain saint which spoke, How long shall be the vision concerning the sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? And he said unto me, 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. And that's basically 3.5 years. And it came to pass, when I, even Daniel, had seen the vision and sought for the meaning, then, behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man, and I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So the angel Gabriel has appeared to him now. That's pretty important. Okay, so the messenger angel of God, who appeared to Mary. Okay, so he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said to me, Understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. So even the angel Gabriel is making it really clear to Daniel that we're talking about end time stuff, not even in his kingdom end, not the Roman Empire, not the Renaissance in the 1700s. He's talking about the end, the 7 years that you and I, saints, may be coming into, the greatest generation on the planet. You thought the World War II generation, which my dad was a part of, was a great generation. Well, I tell you what, you might not think you're great, like Gideon there in the threshing floor, in the wine press, trying to make wheat while hiding out from the enemies, but you are the greatest generation. You are the one that is probably going to see this 7-year tribulation come to pass, where you're going to operate in signs and wonders and miracles like none has ever seen before. You're going to see potentially the 2 witnesses of God, which is amazing, standing, calling judgment down. You're going to see the Antichrist come to power. You're going to have a chance to do exploits for God in this period. So, boy, you are the greatest generation. This is who Daniel's talking about. And so anyway, moving on now. and it came to pass, verse 18 of chapter 8, Daniel, now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face towards the ground. But he touched me and set me upright. And he said, behold, I will make thee know what shall be the last end of the indignation. Okay? And for at the time appointed, the end shall be. The ram which thou... Now, so this is cool. This is where that stuff I did a I think, job of describing before. Now we're going to let the Bible interpret this end time stuff now. So this is kind of the neat part. Just like chapter 7, the end of chapter 7, here we are in the end of chapter 8, and God's going to say, look, this is what it means. Now as he speak of me, deep sleep fell on my ground. So he's in a trance. Daniel's in a trance, and while the angel's speaking to him. And he said, behold, I will make thee know what shall be the last end of the indignation. For at the time appointed the end shall be, it will be. The ram which thou saw, having 2 horns, are the kings of Media and Persia. The rough goat, I'm going to skip through because I already told you this, the king of Grecia. And the great horn that is between and high is the first king. That would be Alexander the Great. Now, that being broken, which means Alexander died prematurely, whereas 4 stood up, his 4 generals. 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. So, okay. And in the latter time of their kingdom, so this is really interesting. Did you hear that? In the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. Man, this is powerful right here. So what he's saying here, and in the latter times of their kingdom, of these 4 kings of Alexander the Great, so it's true that Alexander the Great's kingdom never ended. We could say the Roman kingdom never ended, but that was just a child of Alexander the Great's kingdom. So Alexander the Great's kingdom has never actually ended. So it's kind of interesting that I don't know. You'd have to follow genealogy. You have to find kings and rulers and bloodlines. And believe me, there's some high society, secret society people that actually do follow these bloodlines pretty carefully. And you'd be surprised who's been in power and how long. We're talking a long time. Even though you think it's just by accident certain people are elected. But anyhow, that's a whole nother conspiracy potential discussion. But the interesting thing is in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full. So really, it's when like the sins of the Gentiles have reached to the throne room of heaven, and it's like, okay, it's enough to wrap this show up. And we'll learn about this in Revelation, how bad some things will get before God wraps this show up. Okay, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall rise up. Now this fierce countenance, I mean, he's intense looking, he's probably a handsome, charismatic figure, and he's probably conniving, super smart, because he's infused by demonic power, and he speaks dark sentences, so he probably operates in the black arts, in witchcraft, and in divination, and other types of things along those lines. And so as we read into verse 24, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. There it is. There's that demonic power behind the Antichrist. But not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. Another version for saints. I got to read that again to you, folks. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. So he'll be persecuting the saints, as talked about in Revelation 13, 14, 50. There's a lot of, well, really in chapter 6, 7, and 8, too, of Revelation. You can read ahead to those chapters, 6, 7, 8, Revelation, 13, 14, 15, where the mark of the beast period is, all that kind of stuff. Like I said before, you'll see in chapter 17 of Revelation, verse 12, the 10 global regions in that area too, but he shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. So there's going to be great persecution, a great attack against the church. But the church is not going to be out of witness, and we're going to see that later on about how the church is going to have great power, but it's going to be suffering a lot of spiritual warfare, a lot of persecution during this period too. In verse 25, and through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace he shall destroy many. It's like I said before, this Antichrist is kind of a sneaky dude. He can be in your face warrior, and he can be kind of like passive aggressive. Best way to describe it. And that's how he gets power. He doesn't care. He'll get it, and Satan is very deceptive. He masquerades himself as an angel of light too. So there's going to be a lot of deception that even the very elect could be deceived, Jesus said. So in the New Testament. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. So ultimately, God is going to have enough of this guy, and he's going to come to our rescue. He's going to come to the saints' rescue. He's going to come to the earth's rescue, humanity's rescue. And it goes on to say, but he shall be broken without hand. And then what we have here is, and the vision of verse 26, and the vision of the evening and the morning which was told is true. Wherefore, shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. Well, yeah, many days. Yeah, how about like 3,000 years or something, or 2,500 years? Okay, yeah, God has a sense of humor. You'll find that out later. Okay, in verse 27, and I, Daniel, fainted and was sick certain days. Afterwards I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but no one understood it. So only really he had the interpretation, nobody else understood it. Maybe it sounds like he talked to some people about it, but they're like, Daniel, you're, I don't know, too many vegetables or something, Daniel. So anyhow, but it was in a pretty intense spiritual journey experience where God literally time traveled him. And so, wow, what an amazing chapter. And that's the end of chapter 9. And it's perfect timing, actually. We only have a little bit left. And we're going to get into chapter 9. And we're going to see some more things in there about some King Darius comes to power. And then we're also going to see some exciting things about what to look for, or how the Antichrist will sneak in and make a contract deal with some nations that one way or another way, because saints can kind of watch for him. Because according to a book of Thessalonians, I believe it's 2 Thessalonians, we'll get into that more, that we will see the Antichrist come. You don't know exactly when Jesus is going to come back, that's for sure. But we do have a pretty good idea when the Antichrist appears on the scene, and to be looking and watching for him. So, well, thanks for joining me. We're out of time. Wow, been exciting, and the next chapters are just exciting, so please stay tuned for the next set of teachings.